what we thought was the end of the operation, which was about 7 months ago, we had either relocated inside Afghanistan or moved them out of Afghanistan, about 53,000 people.
Helping those in Afghanistan. Jeff Gibson, president of Big Life, joins the podcast to discuss how they've used their underground church to help others avoid conflict from oppressive groups all throughout the world, and most recently in Afghanistan from the Taliban. So, let's do it.
Too many days in the darkness without a glimpse of the light. Running tired and broken and scared, but I swear I'll never give up the fight. I see you broken and beat, head pulled down over your eyes. Every part of you wants to surrender, but darling, you were meant to survive. With every
So can we start off in Afghanistan, and what has your work over there been like?
We've been working in Afghanistan since about the year 2010. It was just something that the Lord laid on our heart that we should go to that country. We were working in some neighboring countries as well. And at that time, we really saw the need for the gospel in Afghanistan, because there were estimates that as far as Christians go inside the country, it could have been as low as 400, maybe as high as 6,000, which is not much. That's changed for the better in the recent years, but we started working there, and our model is not that we go and do all the work, but that we try to find indigenous people, so Afghans who love Jesus and just want to make disciples of their own people. We found that to be a much more effective strategy over the years. And so we have some leaders inside the country. Obviously, we have to work deeply underground there because of the resistance and the extremists who do not like the work that our leaders are doing. But we've seen a lot of fruit in that country since 2010.
Yeah, that must have been a chaotic last 13 years now, right? Over there, especially in the last couple of years then.
It's been extremely difficult work. It's people have paid with their lives. In fact, in that region of the world, we've lost over 90 people in the last 8 years that have been murdered for their faith. But when that happens and someone is martyred, it's usually a close friend or a family member who will not let that death go in vain, and they pick up the mantle and continue the work. If it's a father or a brother or a friend, because they want to see the mission advanced, and they're not going to let the enemy win.
Yeah, and what can you tell us a little bit about what your mission is over there?
Yeah, so our mission anywhere in the world, our mission statement is to empower believers worldwide to reach and disciple their own people for Jesus Christ. And this is not the way the ministry started. We actually started as a sports ministry, and the first country we ever went to was Iran, and taught baseball and used that as a platform to reach people with the gospel. But it wasn't until about 2003 in India where the Lord kind of revealed to us that it was all about us going. It was all about us teaching. And it's hard to learn the language and the culture and, everything that happens in a different country. And the Lord kind of showed us if we empower the believers that are already there to reach their own people, then they're so much more effective because they know the language, they know the culture, they live there, they don't get homesick. I always joke they like the food a lot better than I do.
Yeah, it's an amazing process to see where you guys are going to, because the first two countries, Afghanistan and Iran, those are two countries that I think would immediately bring up some thoughts of like, wow, that's not I'd say like the safest areas in the world to be doing any work, especially religious related work. Just because of, obviously recent events in the last couple of years with governments and religion being implemented in both of those governments, being a heavy form of how they practice their everyday lives in those governments. And obviously then being a little bit of, I'd say, timid and afraid, to say the least, at adopting new religions and ideas. And you guys also, too, you help kind of relocate the refugees and people that are facing these stigmas and retaliation for practicing their faith in these countries?
Yeah, we weren't really ever thinking about being a rescue operation, but when Afghanistan fell in August of 2021, it was the right thing to do. There was a lot of people, unfortunately, that the U.S. government and others left behind in that country that were very helpful to our cause and NATO's cause there. And we started to get some of our own people out who were in immediate danger. But we connected with a group called Task Force Pineapple. They're on the news quite often. Ex-Green Berets, ex-military people who had interpreters there, friends there, and we were connected to them through a board member, and we started to talk to them, and they said, look, we can get you some intel, but once the airport gets bombed, and they had some intel that it was going to be bombed, they said it's going to shut down everything, and Big Life has boots on the ground. You actually have indigenous people on the ground. Can you help us get them out? And I didn't know the answer to that, to be honest with you, Daniel. And we called our indigenous leaders on the ground there and said, are you willing to do this? And they said, we are absolutely willing to do this. And it wasn't something in our budget. It wasn't something that I would say we're trained for. However, a lot of our leaders, a good portion of them, used to be extremists that had their life radically changed by Jesus.
Oh, really?
They're pretty smart on how to deal with the government and certain factions around the country. So they had connections that worked, and by what we thought was the end of the operation, which was about 7 months ago, we had either relocated inside Afghanistan or moved them out of Afghanistan, about 53,000 people.
Wow, 53,000 people you were able to get out of Afghanistan.
Well, they didn't all come out, but some of them got relocated into other areas.
Internally and internationally.
Yeah, correct.
Wow, that is an amazing feature. 53,000 people. And
I know.
To do that when you didn't obviously enter the country with that intention when you first started over there.
No, it was never in our wheelhouse. That's why we empower indigenous. But one thing we really learned, because when Afghanistan fell, a lot of organizations had to leave. There was NGOs, there was nonprofits, Western nonprofits, obviously our military left. But what we learned, even though our process and our strategy is indigenous people reaching their own, is when it really got tough there, and still is tough there, the indigenous don't run away. They run towards the danger. They are absolutely passionate about their own people, knowing the truth of the gospel. So there's nowhere for them to run, and they wouldn't run if there were places to go. So they ran into the danger. They organized in incredible ways. We do not run things top down, telling them how to do things, because we would mess it up. They know how to do it. We just help empower them to do what the Lord's called them to do.
And what if you could give a little insight into like what how that process was, when the Afghans that you were able to relocate to other countries, are there some countries that were a little bit more, I'd say, softer and more willing to work with you guys on the relocation and in more of a sustainable way, rather than I know there's a lot of countries that were either open to long term, a lot of countries that were open to just like short term, like the UAE that was basically like supposed to be like a temporary not shelter, but a temporary area before the refugees would then process over to like countries like Canada and the United States. But how is that process like?
Yeah, for security reasons, Daniel, I probably won't say which countries we move them into, but I would say our experience or our capability to move them beyond neighboring countries really wasn't much more than that. Now, there were some military or some ex-military people that had special immigration visas. So if we could at least get them across the border somewhere, they had friends in the United States or government officials who could get them further down the line. What mostly we have been able to do is get them out, and then we get them connected with humanitarian relief agencies like the UNHCR, get them registered as refugees, and we have provided subsistence for some of them, housing and food and medical and stuff like that. But it's amazing how fast those funds can run out. So a lot of them have to quickly figure out how to fend for themselves, and they are doing that.
Run out so quickly, and really like the point of view from a refugee too is so like you're really just trying to relocate just to get back to a starting point. There was a story, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the guy, the interpreter Nasrat Ahmad Yar. He interpreted for the United States military for 10 years during the war, and he actually fled Afghanistan during the takeover. And he ends up going to the UAE, like the temporary processing center, and then gets eventually him, his 4 kids, and his wife, all luckily enough, get over to the United States, which is a rare case to get everybody at the same time, pretty much. And he ends up relocating to Philadelphia. And in Philadelphia, he ends up getting robbed at gunpoint.
Yes,
so,
I did.
Yeah, and he ends up moving down to Washington, D.C. And I think he moved down to Washington, D.C. just because I think he probably had some sort of contacts with contractors or something, but just maybe contacts at best, because he started working as a Lyft driver.
Mm-hmm.
And he this was literally 3 weeks ago. He starts working as a Lyft driver and he gets shot to death in D.C., in our nation's capital. He gets shot to death, leaving behind his 4 kids, his wife, and just as importantly, he was sending money back to Afghanistan for his parents and siblings who are literally still there. So such a tragedy to epic proportions, to where it reminds me almost of the Chris Kyle story. If you ever seen American Sniper, that was directed by, I think, Clint Eastwood, even,
Yes.
where he's one of the greatest snipers in American history and does all of these amazing things overseas, almost dies however many times, the sacrifice on his family to then come home and end up getting killed by his own friendly veteran, gets shot. You know, I mean, that story on Nasrat really reminded me of that. Just such a tragedy, but it sets it back to the starting place of, like, when these people are getting to other countries, like, it really is, the struggle is just, you're in the beginning phases of it, really in the infancy, because Nasrat's story was heart-wrenching. I can only imagine how many people have either been in similar situations or, I mean, really just on that grinding it out, trying to learn English or whatever country languages they're in, while trying to put together an income, you know, and just make things work when you don't even know how to make things work. So I really, it's an astounding experience, and it really is wonderful and amazing to know that you guys are really, like, have guided people to give people opportunities to be able to at least get out, because people over there, I mean, it's almost like an underground operation over there, right? Like an underground church, you'd say.
Oh, absolutely. You know, if you did things out in the open there, you wouldn't last long. We've had to do everything underground, and you know, when we say that, we don't even have large gatherings of believers over there, because you know, it'd be too dangerous. Someone could report you. You know, the Taliban or other forces could come in and try to see what's going on. And unfortunately, we've learned from some of our mistakes by losing some people, too large a gathering.
Yeah.
Maybe inviting someone new that you think is a possible seeker seeking truth. And, you know, we have strict guidelines on how many people we allow to gather, where they gather, what they do. In fact, just, you know, years ago, we brought our leaders out and we met in another country just for a couple of days, just to get their heart, you know, and they don't like to share things too much electronically because it's too dangerous. And Daniel, we were actually singing some worship songs out loud in a hotel room, and they started weeping, and they said, we can never do this in our country. We can't sing this loud because someone would hear it and we would be in danger. So it just reminds you, you know, the freedom that we have here and what they don't have there.
Yeah, that's really what it comes back to, you know, especially because, I mean, where you think, like, you could maybe go into the mountains or something, like, you could do that, but, like, for how long? Until somebody notices, like, there's a large group of people heading out into the into the mountains every Sunday morning, or and that obviously rings alarm bells. And then at that point, you got to think, is it worth it to be doing it in the open? Because if you end up getting caught and then something happens to you, then everything comes crashing down, and it's the end of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have lost people too. I mean, we're not talking like in America, typically when we say, oh yeah, I lost my my family member X, Y, and Z. It's, a lot of times our first jump to conclusion on that is like sickness and health issues and things like that. And in those areas, when you refer to, where I've lost so and so, it's a different type of ending to that person's life that's quite more relatable to the medieval times.
It sure is. I'm just thinking of some recent deaths, and it was some of the workers that were out on the field, and they were traveling, and they got a call to go home. And one man came home and found out that his parents and his wife had been poisoned because they found out they were believers. Sometimes it's brutal. They torture them, they capture them, they torture them, trying to get them to reveal more of the network of who they're working with. But we've, trying not to be too graphic, but we've had leaders with their throats slashed that have been shot in the head and killed. It's just horrific. It's a punch in the gut when that happens. It's so hard to take that, and for our leaders who work with these men and women day in and day out, it kind of makes them draw back. And every time they do that, I think, okay, are we doing something we shouldn't be doing? Are we sending these people in harm's way? But I have to tell you that usually we are the ones trying to pull them back when they say, we're going to this new area, we're going into this region, we really got to share the gospel. And sometimes we'll say, hey, that's really dangerous there. Maybe you shouldn't go there. Maybe you should think about that. And they say, you know what? The Lord's telling me to go, and I'm not going to disobey. And I think that, not that it makes it easier, but it makes you understand that they're doing what the Lord's called them to do. They're not being sent by Big Life. That's not how we operate. We just empower them. We help them. It's their ministry that we come alongside them as they do that. But after that shrinking back time where, they have to grieve, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
But then it's like they get this resolve, even a greater resolve, that, again, I'm not letting that death be in vain. So who will rise up and who will continue this work? And persecution makes the gospel spread. And what's an amazing thing that they said to us years ago, and I will never forget this as long as I live. The persecution was really great for several months, about 3 years ago. I mean, we had people that were being chased. We had people that were being threatened. They get calls on their phone saying, we know who you are. We're coming to kill you and your family and your kids. And we started to pray with them. And as we were praying, they said, wait a minute, do not pray for persecution to stop, because we always see greater opportunities to share during persecution. But pray that we get through the persecution. And I never forget that, because when I feel persecuted, I'm like, Lord, please take it this way.
Stop it. Yeah,
stop.
yeah.
I don't want it. And they're like, no, do not pray that way. I mean, what kind of faith is that? That puts me to shame.
Yeah, but it's a great, a phenomenal perspective on it, because it's almost like, allow me to handle it. Let me take it on and push through the suffering. Rather than eliminate the suffering in total, just allow me to handle it, which I think is really a very high level way of thinking. Logistically, like, the toughest part for you guys too has got to be like communication, right? I mean, is there like a big English speaking people out there, or is it, because I think the languages are in Afghanistan like are Pashto and Dari, right? It's not
yeah.
How are you guys able to communicate with them?
Well, fortunately, we have one person who handles all of the reports and communication, and then he translates it for us. Otherwise, we'd be dead in the water without that. But that's how we communicate back and forth to them. again, the lines of communication are usually the biggest problem. Some won't talk on phones. I mean, you and I are on a Zoom call right now. They would not do that.
Yeah.
You know? So they found specific ways on how to communicate, even with certain apps where as soon as you send a message, it's deleted off your phone. Because they've been on public transportation over there, and the Taliban stops and they search everybody's phone. So you can't have that information lingering in your phone. But that's been a godsend that we get this information. And we do have some nationals that get to go in the country now and then and get even better reports and come in and out. And that's really been helpful.
Yeah, because they're able to kind of maybe provide some on ground, some support on ground that gives a little refresher to people of like, we do have people come in and out. It's not just over the phone.
Absolutely.
And what are some other countries you guys work in
that region?
In any country, really. I know you said India before.
Yeah, we're actually working in about 161 countries around the world. As I told you, it started in 1999, 2000 in Iran. In Central Asia, we're working in Pakistan. We work in a little bit in Iran, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, those kind of countries. In India, around those countries, Bhutan, Nepal, Myanmar. Myanmar is still not.
Yeah.
Terrible things happen in Myanmar, but yeah, the reason we mostly started, as you alluded to earlier, Iran, Afghanistan. How many ministries are working over there? But the North Africa, Middle East, South and Central Asia region, they call the 1040 window, and that's between the 10th and the 40th parallel. But it's really 2 out of 3 people on the planet live in the 1040 window. So it's a very heavy populated area that really needs the gospel.
Yeah, I mean, you got New Delhi over there in India, which is India's has the highest population. I think they just passed China as the #1 populated country, mainly because of New Delhi, just this past year.
Yeah, I know that China and India kind of argue back and forth who has more, and
yeah, they do. And honestly, I don't know who's counting those, honestly, because I could say they just passed them or whatever, but like, do I know for sure if it's China or India with that many people? Who's counting that many? I have no idea. But
yeah.
that
I don't think they do either.
Yeah. You got so many coming in.
Yeah.
But that is some really, really great work that you guys do, honestly, because I feel like it's needed, especially in those areas we were just talking about. Those are areas that I think people need, hope and that in them, like, because they're dealing with such hardships that if you don't have that, I don't really know how you'd be able to push through some of those times. I mean, like, think of even the family of Nazrat. I mean, he goes to America, and his family's got to be like, okay, I never have to worry about his safety. I just have to worry about mine. He's living in Washington, D.C., which out of any area in that whole country, people probably know Washington, D.C., and probably New York City, they probably know. And then all of a sudden they get a call that he's no longer with them. That would be just awful to hear. Back in Afghanistan, when you're struggling with what you are struggling with, I mean, without it, I mean, what else do you have to fall back on, really?
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking that you would escape all that danger, and come to a free country, and then have this tragedy happen to you and your family. My heart breaks for him. I'm sure he had great hope. I'm sure he probably felt great relief when he got here, and then to have your life snuffed out by some senseless act like that it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah, working as a Lyft driver too, because if there was one, I would say Lyft drivers and Uber drivers out of the top 5 jobs I could think of. If you say what are the top 5 like grind type of jobs, it would probably be like restaurant server, Lyft driver, Uber driver, where you could just work as many hours as you possibly can fill in. Because he was doing, I think, like up to like 20 hours a day working, because he's also sending money back to Afghanistan, where he said he was sending like $150, and that would feed them for over a month, his whole family over there, because the economy's completely completely wrecked and shocked over there. But like everything else with, I mean, any issue morality based and religious, everything is kind of in a.
Yeah. The Taliban's gotten more organized, obviously, in the last 2 years. Earlier when we were talking about moving those 53,000, that wasn't an easy thing to do, but it was easier because there was disorganized Taliban. But since they've gotten organized, it's the work is harder, movement is harder. And like I said, as of 7-8 months ago, we thought we were done with that. But our leaders inside the country have found another group that is being daily threatened by the Taliban, that they're going to kill them because they're believers. So we have started up again, and we're trying to move 8,500 people out. And that's not going to be easy. It's not something in our budget. The first one wasn't in our budget.
Yeah.
The Lord provided. We spent about $5 million. It looks like we're going to spend $4.5 to $5 million on this operation as well. But again, we go, okay, it's the right thing to do, and we're not going to shy away from the danger.
Yeah, no, that's good to know you guys have your roots in the ground over there then.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the leaders are still there. They're not going anywhere, and they are, imperative to the operation. None of this could happen without them on the ground. If this was a U.S. based or, Big Life trying to do it from the United States, it would be a total failure. But when you have the right people on the ground and remembering where they came from, and how qualified they are to do that, how passionate they are to do that, you'll see great results.
Are there safer provinces in Afghanistan for for religious tolerance, or is it all just one blanket slate? Because I gotta imagine the cities have got to be really, really, really tough to practice anything else. But are there rural, safer areas to practice religious freedom at all? Or is the fear really, well, if it starts one place openly, it's going to talk, it's going to spread around, and then everyone knows eventually there's going to be a major pushback?
Yeah, honestly, I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that, but I will tell you that when U.S. forces were there, and I didn't even know this till recently, my leaders explained to me, they said, U.S. forces were there. The Taliban obviously was in hiding in certain areas, but they said there were like warlords and different factions of Afghanistan that were controlled territory by certain individuals. And they said, we could not go into certain areas because of how it was controlled. They said, but since the fall, basically all of Afghanistan is open. They said, we can almost travel anywhere. Now, it's not without questions and looking at your paperwork and everything else. They said, but we haven't found that there are off-limit areas to us anymore. So again, that has led to opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I guess I could see that because they just feel like, all right, all the Western forces are out, so it's really just us, or maybe somebody who doesn't have as much power as us. Because they probably thought with us still there, it could be somebody trying to infiltrate and then take away what we have, like our little nooks throughout the country.
Mm-hmm.
And a fun fact for you, actually, Colonel Mark Bruzelli, actually, during the Afghanistan withdrawal, he was the colonel leading the medical response, especially during the day of the bombing at the airport, where 13 Americans died, 60 Afghans died, and hundreds were injured. Colonel Mark Bruzelli, actually, he was on episode 6 of the podcast, actually, Small World. Yeah, he's in Miami, works down here in Miami at the Army Trauma Training Center, and he actually came on the podcast. He was on the 6th episode. So I'm just thinking about this now. I'm like, it's such a small world.
We probably know some of the same people. I do not know the colonel personally. Scott Mann, who's frequently on different news stations talking about what's going on in Afghanistan. We worked with him closely and some of the people he's connected to. So yeah, it's fantastic to work with these guys who, they were on the ground there, so they know the situation. And, for them to, get involved with an operation after most of them are out of the military at this point, but they still made a way. They had connections, and they're like, we cannot leave these people that helped us there. We cannot leave them just to the hands of the Taliban. So they've been very instrumental in getting a lot of people out.
And your video, actually, you guys have online, gave a really, really great point of view of what it's like being a refugee in that type of setting where it's like, I'm kind of in hiding, but I'm hiding in plain sight. But at the same time, I am hiding in my house most of the day, because it's like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be wanted or if what's going to happen. And your video gave such a great point of view, because the feeling of getting a phone call from somebody saying like, you need to hide, you need to get out of here now, and then just grabbing anything that's important to you and then just running out of your house in like probably 30 to 40 seconds of what that phone call would be like, what was insane. And it really gave a great point of view from inside of like a refugee's mind.
Yeah. You've got to think that their lives are in total upheaval, right? You have no security, you have no safety. Things can change at a moment's notice. So, I'm sure they're pre-planning, when I get that call, what do I have to grab besides my family and my kids? We've got to get out of here. But I just can't fathom that, Daniel, the way that they just have to run out into the open, run out and leave everything that they've ever known behind. And like I said, we're going to countries and not knowing people and trying, like you said, trying to learn the language, trying to get work, trying to feed your family. It's an incredibly heartbreaking situation.
Yeah. And like we were talking about before, it is really just the beginning.
Yeah.
So that is, I can't thank you enough, Jeff, for coming on and chatting about your work. And for people that are interested in watching the video I was just talking about, or learning more about Big Life and the work that you guys do, or want to join and be a part of the work that you guys do, where can people find you the best? Is it big.life, or where would you refer people to?
That's it. You can put the 3 W's if you want, www.big.life, but most people just type in big.life and that's it. There's no .com or .net or anything like that. There's a whole page on there about our work in Afghanistan. So people can read about that. They can watch the video that you're referring to. And if they want to get involved, praying for the people there, even giving funds to help get more people out. Right now, it's costing about $500 per person to get them out. That's for transportation and paperwork, and then getting them registered with UNHCR and other NGOs once they get out to help them. So yeah, we'd appreciate any help anyone wants to give. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's thank you guys for staying on this and being like the Underground Railroad out there for people, religious wise, for people in Afghanistan and in the other countries that you guys work out of, because it really is amazing stuff. And it really provides just people hope with, and I feel like a purpose, right? I mean, it's like a purpose for living, it's not just hope, it is them living, it's their way of life. So kudos to you guys on it. And I'd love to touch base with you guys again down the road and see how things are and get some more light into some of this work you guys do.
Yeah, I'd love to give you some updates on this 8,500. That's going to take probably a longer time than it took even to move the 53,000, because like I said, they're organized. But we're honestly, we're a bunch of nobodies, and the Lord has just made a way, and he's just doing incredible work because we're just willing to do it, and we don't take any of the credit. It's all glory to God.
I would not classify you guys as a nobody. That's for sure. My podcast is filled with the greatest people in the world doing the greatest work across the world. You guys are phenomenal, Jeff, and I really want you guys to know that, because if you guys, I ask basically every guest that comes on, if you guys aren't doing the work that you're doing, what happens to the people that you're trying to help? It tends to be not a lot of good things. And that's the reason, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, because we just need more people, more organizations like these to not only like be out there and doing it, but to encourage other people to do it and do it openly. So thanks. Thank you for that, Jeff. I can hopefully leave you with that.
Yeah, thank you for those kind words. That's very nice.
Yeah, and I will see you down the road, Jeff.
Very good. Thanks, Dan.